nature is inefficient, relatively inefficient. Resources that are used by the public sector everywhere in the world is not used as efficiently as you have in the private sector. That's one. And of course, in Nigeria, we have created structural, if I may use the word, impediments that make it difficult for us to actually use these resources as efficiently as we ideally would like to have. Now, what have we done? What has the government done? We've brought in a due process. We've brought in more transparency in the way assets are managed. So these things are getting better, but it takes a long time. And like I said, there are statutory impediments which we need to address that are outside our scope. Now, for the central bank, what we have tried to do is to create, for instance, the TSA, the Treasury Single Account, working with the Ministry of Finance and the Accountant General's Office. We have now created a single balance for all federal government accounts on a 24-hour basis, so that you then don't have to have money in one account of the federal government, and the federal government will also be borrowing money using another account. So a single account is what the federal government will have at the end of each trading day at the central bank. The other thing we did, which if you recall, was to raise the level of the CRR, the cash reserve ratio, so that for those who get public sector money, they will then lend less to the public, and that way will cut down on that propensity to look for public sector money, because oftentimes when they get the public sector money, they then put it into federal government treasury or instruments, which will also mean that the federal government is borrowing its own money. So all that is being cut down, and I think that we're getting better. Okay. But we need to power the private sector. Okay. That's part of what the new policy by the central bank is going to help us achieve. Okay. The private sector all over the world is what powers the larger economy, and that's what we should do here.
Okay, Mr. Crawford, we'll come back to you, but let's bring in Mr. Ogunye. Mr. Ogunye, the issue of management of resources. You talked about the many states we have, but let's see this. In 2011, precisely August, the debt profile, domestic debt profile, stood at $42.23 billion, and the external debt stood at $5.67 billion. So put that together, it gives us about $47.9 billion. Now, domestic. But between then and now, we've had state governments go out to the bond markets. They're issuing bonds. They are borrowing money here and there. For instance, for lack of a better example, Osun State talked about the fact that they had to borrow money to pay salaries before it got so bad. What does that say of the administrative capacity of the leaders, so to speak?
You know, I would say the way I feel about it, and I feel strongly about it. I've heard people argue about the need for government to be more creative, more imaginative, look inwards. The last time the president said that the state should look inwards, they should go. What do you mean by all this cliché? If you look inwards, so are you going to tax people to death? So how many of these people can even pay taxes anyway? People don't have savings. They don't have a life. So what are you going to tax out of them? So how do you look inwards? You're talking about Osun State. It's a good example. Because people can talk about just living by, day-to-day solution. I'm not interested in all those. In Osun State, you have a situation whereby that state is struggling currently. And it depends on federal allocation to pay salaries, to pay emoluments. Currently, the allocation is far below what they pay monthly. And that's where the crisis is coming from.
But before, staying within the states now. Now, you mentioned Osun. There are other states as well that have mineral resources. So let's look at the legal side of it. Are there some laws that need to be tinkered?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. And quickly, we're deceiving ourselves that we are running a federation. We are not. We are running a unitary government that is disguising as a federation. And I cited Osun State. Do you know that if you go to Osun State, all the layout of crops of stones. If you want to make a quarry, you know you have to go to the federal government, get a mine permit to break stone in your state. So if you're talking about reinventing Nigeria, the Mineral Act as it stands has to go. The Land Use Act has to be remodified. The Petroleum Act has to be remodified. Because the law today in Nigeria is that everything that is beneath the soil belongs to the federal government.
So that forces the states to go borrowing.
There was a time in this country the federal government was borrowing money from Western region. So we've moved full circle. The federal government was borrowing money from Western. Check the records. In the First Republic. So what is wrong with the Lagos owning the port and the federal government going there to generate taxes through customs? What is the business of the federal government owning Lagos port or owning airport here? Go to the United States. We have these models. And I'm saying that the idea of the federal government just sitting down at the center is not even a federal government. It's a misnomer to call it a federal government. It's a unitary government of Nigeria. And I've said this severally. And so when states cannot generate their own resources and they have to go cap in hand, a mono economy, oil, we are going to have crisis down the road. So how are you going to survive? That's why I'm saying that the CBN can do all he wants to do about financial engineering, about advice. As a matter of fact, the CBN says that they are the financial advisor of the federal government. They can be advising all they like. But I'm saying that the automation of state that has taken place in Nigeria, the replication of bureaucracies, and mind you, in the same Osun State as an example, the last time I checked, the governor was even talking about creating more local governments. I said, for what? For political reasons? How are you going to run them? These are the things that we have to do. So when people say that the government must be looking inward, they must be innovative, even the model that we use in Lagos. Do you know the debt profile of Lagos? An economist will tell me, like my good brother here, that the debt to GDP borrowing threshold has not been hit yet. So it's still okay. But the economy is in the shambles. So my take and my view is that you can be talking about palliatives, about just short-term solutions. So we really from this crisis, we are able to paper over it, then we move to the next and wait for the next. But I'm a fundamental person. I'm looking
so you
for...
want the laws?
Yes, those laws have to go. Yeah. They have to go. They are an impediment to the progress of this country.
Okay, as an economist, Mr. Oyebode, what's your own recipe for all of this?
So I think Mr. Ogunye speaks some truth. I sometimes look at things you consider under the exclusive legislative list. Registration of business names, right, is owned by the federal government. Now, it means that states can't compete. So states can't be innovative, right? It means if you look at what you have to make commerce thrive, right? So if you think about innovation in states, right? States make money from rent and taxes, primarily, and then from the utilization of state-owned assets, right? So if you look at those three primary revenue-generating sources, taxes come from commerce, right, from business activity. Now, states cannot, they don't run from generation to distribution their own power systems, right? They're only allowed to intervene in off-grid solutions, so places that are not connected to the national grid. Now, it means that power, which is a critical element of being competitive as a location, is out of your hands, it's out of your control, right? Now, if you think about things like business registration, which we've debated for years, and the federal government has been unable to fix, right? Those are things that are firmly under federal government control. So it limits, one, the effectiveness of the states to be innovative. So unless you deepen taxation, right, or you streamline from the cost side, right, you reduce cost to the barest minimum, it's very difficult for many of these states to pay.
But the way you're talking about taxes, you're talking about borrowing and taxes, but let's look at the side of management. Because even if the laws, as Mr. Ogunye said, are rejigged, are worked on, would that stop the state from issuing bonds?
So again, that's the point I'm going to make. So I think that this is I always say that this is a one-time opportunity to rethink how we manage this nation. So this fiscal administration is being threatened right now. Now, you need to ask yourself, as a state governor, does it make sense for me to borrow to build schools? Does it make sense for me to borrow to build state houses? There's a state house in Kaduna that the previous administration incurred some significant debt in putting up. I doubt that the current governor, if he had a choice, would spend that amount of money building a state house. It's not generating you 1 naira. It's just a place for the governor to sleep or work.
We are looking at these debts and what they are used for.
Again, yes. So the point is, the process of going to the capital markets is a long process, right? Getting SEC approval is a process. It's also a lot of citizen engagement, right? People need to say, look, you are my state governor. I need to talk to my House of Assembly representative, because these things go through legislative, they get legislative assent, right? So if you are my rep at the House of Assembly, are you sleeping? Do you go there to sleep or do you go there to throw chairs, right? Because the reality of the conversation is, if you do not interrogate what these bonds, this debt is being used for, then you always get back into this quagmire.
Okay, let's ask Mr. Okorafor. Mr. Okorafor, there's all of this points to one thing. You're the advisor, financial advisor to the federal government, but then are you also involved in the borrowing or the issuance of bonds by the states? Are you involved there?
Yes, I would say we are involved from a regulatory perspective, and DMO is also very active. The Debt Management Office, one of the fiscal agencies we have put in place, the government put in place to ensure that more in that sphere is working very well. And that's why right now we're able to know even what Nigeria owes. We have to thank the Debt Management Office.
Okay,
now,
but
the central bank
if
itself,
you're, Mr. Okorafor, 1 second, if you're involved from the regulatory perspective, the Debt Management Office is also involved as well. Are you also involved in the management of these funds when they come in? Because some will say, for instance, someone tweeted here and says, G. Child says, absolutely irresponsible that state governors borrow money to fund personal ambition/project. In other words, are you involved in the management of these funds where they come in, where they are utilized and how they are utilized?
well, the way we come in, it's important to know that we have our limits. What we try to do is to make sure that people or state governments borrow in a way that they will not put undue pressure on the budget of the states. So we give them conditions and rate those bonds. And we also expect the people who approve the assembly, when they package this, the banks that come with them, there are all kinds of checks and balances. For us, we give standards to say, if you're coming in, if we understand the health, if we're able to estimate the health of your economy, the state economy, we will then use our rating system. There are some bonds by states that do not qualify for certain liquidity considerations, or even if they do, you have specific, you have ratings, you have percentages you have to take into consideration to say that, look, you can't go beyond this. We expect that the states themselves should know what is right, and DMO actually plays a greater role in that. Now, but let me go to what is important for us as the central bank. What we have done using the issue of the new forex ban is to say, hey, we don't have enough money to use in importing things like toothpick, like cosmetics, Indian incense, all kinds of things that you'll be surprised people spend money on. We are advisors. We cannot control people's lifestyle. The lifestyle of Nigerians is something that people should look at. Like we keep saying, the parties haven't stopped, champagne hasn't stopped flowing. A recent study by economists showed that about 7 or so ShopRite firms or shops in Nigeria in the past 1 year sold more champagne than all the ShopRite firms, shops in South Africa, which is worrisome. The same thing with SUV cars. There are so many things that we really do not need. We have local production in the motor industry. We are trying to make sure that that industry grows.
Mr. Okorafor, Yes, as we were talking, even the guests in the studio, they seem to disagree with some of the things you're saying. People are watching and they're thinking, okay, if you have all of this, things put in place to check or advise on how monies that are dispensed are properly used, why is it that we have found ourselves in this quagmire, as it were?
Remember that you have fiscal and monetary authorities. You also have people's lifestyle. People smuggle. There are all kinds of things that people do to subvert policies that have